35 seconds. That's all it took. Not 35 minutes into the game, not 35 possessions, 35 seconds after tip-off. And the decision that had basketball fans arguing for weeks had already started answering itself on the floor. Senegal's blitz defense walked onto that court with a specific game plan: pressure early, trap the ball handler, generate chaos in the backcourt, and force mistakes before Team USA could even settle into their offensive identity. In 35 seconds, that plan worked perfectly, just not against the player most people expected to be running the point. Chelsea Gray was on the floor. Caitlin Clark was on the bench. And by the time the first quarter was barely underway, Breanna Stewart, Dewana Bonner, and everyone watching from home already had a pretty clear picture of where this starting lineup conversation was heading. But here's the thing. This video isn't just about a coaching decision. It's about what happened when Clark finally checked in, what it did to 5 decades of international basketball records, and what all of it is quietly telling us about the 2026 season that Indiana Fever fans are already circling on their calendars. Because if you've been waiting for a sign that the version of Clark who was starting to genuinely take over professional basketball before the injury derailed everything, that version didn't just come back. She came back and immediately reminded everyone why the conversation around her was never really about hype. It was always about what the numbers do when she's on the floor. Let's go back to what the situation actually looked like before tip-off. Because the pressure Clark was walking into wasn't normal first-game pressure. This wasn't just rust and nerves and getting back into competitive rhythm. FIBA and their broadcast partner had built the entire qualifying tournament's marketing identity around her face. Promotional materials, tournament branding, every piece of visual content they pushed out in the lead-up to this game had Clark front and center. And all of that was constructed around a player who hadn't touched a competitive basketball floor in 239 days. 239 days. That's not a minor injury layoff. That's not a few weeks of soreness and maintenance. That's months of rehabilitation, training facilities, controlled workouts, and 0 real game situations. No defensive pressure that actually means something. No crowd, no stakes, just work, recovery, and waiting. And then you walk into a gym where your face is on every banner, where an entire tournament has been marketed around your return, and a head coach makes the call to open the game without you in the starting lineup. Most players in that position either come out trying to prove something the moment they check in, or they tighten up under the weight of the moment and play cautious. Clark did neither. Before the game, she was asked directly about the pressure, and what she said was genuinely revealing. She told reporters she expected to feel anxious going in, but when the moment actually arrived, the feeling shifted. Instead of anxiety, she felt excited. That's not a media-trained non-answer. That's a real psychological distinction, and it matters. Anxiety and excitement are physiologically almost identical. Elevated heart rate, heightened awareness, energy looking for somewhere to go. But the difference in how you interpret that state completely changes how you perform under it. She also said something else before that game that got less attention than it deserved. She said clearly that this is not a stage where you come out and try to be the star player. That's not how USA basketball works. Think about what that framing tells you. That's not someone who spent 239 days on the sideline, hungry to come back and light up a stat sheet. That's someone who spent those months doing homework, watching film, understanding her role within a specific system, and coming in with a plan to execute that role rather than audition for a bigger one. The mindset was already different from what you'd expect, and the performance that followed made it impossible to ignore just how different. Now, let's talk about the decision that put all of this in motion, because Chelsea Gray starting at point guard wasn't an irrational call. On paper, the logic was completely defensible. Gray is a championship-tested veteran. She's won at the highest levels of professional basketball. She understands how to run an offense when the moment gets heavy, and she brings a composure to pressure situations that most players spend entire careers trying to develop. Kara Lawson looked at her roster, weighed her options, and made a call that any reasonable basketball analyst could justify before tip-off. The problem is that Sagal didn't care about what was reasonable on paper. Sagal came out with an aggressive, full-court blitz scheme specifically engineered to create backcourt chaos. The idea behind that kind of defensive pressure is straightforward but brutal. Trap the ball handler before they can advance the ball, force them into difficult decisions in the backcourt before the offense can even organize, and manufacture turnovers out of confusion and hesitation. It's a high-risk defensive strategy because if the ball handler can break the press cleanly, it creates instant advantages in transition. But if the ball handler hesitates even slightly, the whole offense can collapse before it starts.
Within 35 seconds, Gray was pulled off the point guard position. De'Erica Hamby and Angel Reese, two players whose natural roles have nothing to do with initiating offense under a full-court press, were stepping in just to handle the ball and manage the pressure. The starting unit wasn't executing their offensive system, they were surviving. They were absorbing Sagal's blitz and trying to stay afloat long enough for something to develop. And that's not a criticism of those players individually. Gray is an elite basketball player. Hamby and Reese are both excellent at what they do. But Sagal's blitz was architecturally designed to disrupt exactly the kind of methodical offensive organization that unit was built around. And it was working. Then Lawson made the substitution. Clark checked in, and the first thing she did was get 3 assists on her first 3 touches. Not 3 assists in the first quarter, 3 assists on 3 consecutive possessions. The pace of the game changed in real time. You could feel it in the broadcast, feel it in how Sagal's defense was suddenly reacting instead of dictating. The same full-court blitz that had the starting unit scrambling was now something completely different. Not a problem to survive, but a situation to read and exploit. Here's what made that shift so significant, and why it went beyond Clark just being a better ball handler under pressure. Sagal's blitz scheme is built on a specific assumption that the ball handler will either pick up their dribble, make a rushed decision, or try to force their way through the trap. Any of those responses plays directly into the defense's hands. The trap closes, the passing lane disappears, and the offense either happens or the offense resets with momentum completely lost. Clark was doing none of those things. She was reading Sagal's defensive alignment before the trap could even fully form. She was identifying the weak side of the press, finding teammates in rhythm, and delivering the ball into spaces that didn't exist long enough for most point guards to even recognize. What made it especially damaging for Sagal was the Clark and Ryan Howard connection that developed throughout the game. Every time Sagal committed to the blitz, every single time they sent that aggressive pressure, Howard was standing at the arc with a clean look. Clark was finding him so consistently and so early in the shot clock that Sagal's coaching staff faced a genuine binary. Keep blitzing and surrender wide-open threes to one of the best shooters on the floor, or pull back the pressure and let Clark operate freely at the point of attack with space to make decisions. There was no middle ground. There was no defensive adjustment that addressed both problems simultaneously. That's not just good play. That's the kind of decision-making that breaks defensive schemes at a conceptual level, where the defense has no good answer because the offensive player has already accounted for both options before the play even develops. Howard finished the game with a team-high 21 points, and the broadcast made a specific point of noting that essentially all of his three-point makes came directly off Clark's reads. She was generating high-quality looks for a teammate at a rate and with a consistency that Sagal simply had no answer for. Clark finished with 17 points herself, 4 of 5 from 3, 5 of 5 from the free throw line, all of that on top of the record-setting facilitation in 19 minutes off the bench. Now let's go through the records specifically, because each one lands differently when you understand the full context around it. Record 1. Most assists in a Team USA Senior National Team debut, men or women, any era. Clark's 12 assists is the highest assist total ever recorded by any player making their debut for the United States Senior National Team.
Not in recent years, not in women's basketball specifically. Across both programs, across every era of Team USA senior national team competition, no player has ever handed out more assists in their debut game than Clark did, coming off the bench in 19 minutes. That's the first record. Record 2 goes further than American basketball entirely. Most assists in any senior national team debut from across all countries, men or women, in FIBA competition. Every country that participates in international basketball, every debut game ever officially recorded at the senior national team level, Clark's 12 assists is the all-time record across all of it. Not just for the United States, for every program, every era, every player who has ever made their senior international debut in FIBA-sanctioned competition.
Record 3 places her performance in a different kind of historical context. Second most assists in FIBA qualifying tournament history. Not debut records, not single game categories, but the full record across every qualifying game ever played by any player at any level of FIBA qualifying competition. One game, 19 minutes, second all-time in the history of the tournament format. Record 4 is the one that might be the most remarkable when you consider the circumstances. Most assists by any player coming off the bench in FIBA history, men or women. She didn't start the game. She came off the bench in a reserve role, played less than 20 minutes, and still owns the all-time FIBA record for assists by a reserve player. The record isn't qualified by competition level or era or gender. It's the all-time record for any substitute player in FIBA history. Record 5, most assists in any single half of a FIBA qualifying game ever played. 8 assists before halftime, 0 turnovers. That first half alone, those 19 minutes split across 2 quarters where Clark was essentially dismantling a defense specifically designed to prevent exactly what she was doing. That half stands as its own record independent of everything else she did in the game. 5 records, 19 minutes, 239 days removed from competitive basketball. The 0 turnover number needs its own conversation because it's easy to see 12 assists and think the game was just flowing Clark's way and the numbers piled up naturally. That's not what happened. The 0 turnovers are actually the detail that separates this performance from a great game and puts it in a genuinely different category. Here's the statistical reality of high assist totals. They almost always carry risk. When you're pushing pace, making aggressive reads, trying to find teammates in rhythm before defensive rotations can close, you're operating at the edges of what's controlled and what becomes a turnover. The players who put up the biggest assist numbers in basketball history are almost universally also among the players with the highest turnover totals. That's not a coincidence. It's a reflection of the fact that aggressive facilitation and ball security exist in natural tension with each other. The more you push to create for teammates, the more chances you take, and those chances occasionally go wrong. Clark was doing all of it. The aggressive reads, the pace pushing, the early decisions before the defense could set, and not giving the ball away once. Not once in the first half against a defense that was architecturally constructed to generate turnovers. That specific combination, record-level assist production with 0 turnovers, coming off 8 months away from competitive basketball, against a team whose entire defensive identity was built around creating exactly the mistakes Clark wasn't making. That's not just efficiency. That's a category of processing speed and situational awareness that very few players at any level of basketball have ever demonstrated. It tells you something specific about what happened during those 239 days. The physical recovery from injury is one thing. The cognitive and competitive sharpness is something else entirely. Players who have been away from competitive basketball for extended periods almost universally show some degree of hesitation in their decision-making when they return. A slight lag in reading defenses, a tentativeness in pulling the trigger on passes that need to happen quickly. Clark showed none of that. The reads were immediate, the decisions were clean, the ball was delivered before the defensive window closed. Whatever she was doing during that rehab process, it wasn't just about getting her body right. One element of this performance that got somewhat buried under the records and the coaching controversy was just how good the entire team looked despite the circumstances around them. 6 players made their senior national team debuts simultaneously in that game. Paige Bueckers, Angel Reese, and 4 others were all stepping onto the international floor for the first time at the senior level, which, under normal conditions, creates a level of disjointed play that even the most talented rosters struggle to avoid. Debuts are usually readable, the slight awkwardness of unfamiliar spacing, the hesitation before making certain cuts, the moments where the chemistry that takes time to build just isn't quite there yet. This team didn't look like that. Bueckers was fluid throughout the game, making the moment look completely routine, moving within the offense like someone who had been running this system for months rather than hours. Angel Reese was as close to flawless as a debut can realistically be. 1 missed shot on the night, 8 rebounds, doing the physical and positional work that makes everything happening on the perimeter actually sustainable. That kind of interior presence is easy to overlook in a game dominated by facilitate and shooting narratives, but it matters enormously. When the rebounding and interior defense are handled at a high level, the perimeter players can take risks they otherwise couldn't, knowing the penalty for a missed shot is mitigated.
What Lawson got from this group, instead of 6 debut players creating 6 separate adjustment curves, was a coordinated, high-tempo offensive system that was generating good looks on essentially every possession once Clark was running it. That doesn't happen without real compatibility between the personnel, and it tells you something about how this roster was put together and prepared. But it also raises a genuine question about what the ceiling of this group looks like once the novelty of the debut games passes and the combinations Lawson wants to lean on are more clearly established. Which brings us directly to what Lawson said after the game. When Kara Lawson got to the post-game podium, she used a phrase that jumped out immediately for anyone who knows how to read coaching language. She said the lineup and rotations are in finding mode. Coaches do not say that when they're satisfied. That specific phrasing is not a deflection or a media management technique. It's a direct signal that the starting lineup is not settled, that the rotation hasn't found its final shape, and that what happened on the floor in that game is actively informing what she's going to do differently next time. She also did something more specific than just acknowledging flux. She pointed directly to a particular unit, Clark, Kelsey Plum, Arike Ogunbowale, and Monique Billings, as the group that, in her words, took them to a different level in the second quarter. She named that unit specifically and publicly as the group that elevated the game. That unit did not include Chelsea Gray. That's not ambiguous language. That's a head coach at a post-game press conference publicly identifying the lineup combination that changed the game and notably leaving out the player who started at point guard. The performance on the floor was already telling the story. Lawson at the podium was confirming that she's reading it the same way the rest of us are. The only question is how quickly she acts on it. Now, a fair challenge to raise here is whether a 64-point blowout over Sagal actually tells us anything meaningful about how this team handles serious international competition. That's a legitimate point. Sagal is not a top-tier international program, and the margin of victory alone doesn't prove the system is ready for the heaviest tests the qualifying tournament will present. But here's why that challenge, while technically valid, misses what this game was actually revealing. The opponent's quality level doesn't change what Clark's decision-making looked like against a defense specifically built to force turnovers. It doesn't change the fact that 0 turnovers happened on 12 assists when the press was active and aggressive. It doesn't change the way the offense transformed from a unit surviving pressure to a unit weaponizing it the moment she checked in. Those are process indicators, not outcome indicators. The margin of victory is about Sagal. What Clark's decision-making looked like under that specific defensive pressure is about Clark, and what it revealed about her processing speed, her field vision, and her ability to read and react in real time is information that holds regardless of who was on the other side of the floor. For Indiana Fever fans, all of this has a very specific meaning that goes beyond the qualifying tournament entirely. The 2026 WNBA season is the next time this version of Clark is consistently on the floor for 30-plus minutes a night in a competitive professional setting. The injury that took her out in 2025, before the season ever developed real momentum, meant that the player who was starting to genuinely reshape what was possible in a WNBA offense, the decision-making, the pace, the way she was creating clean looks for teammates at a rate the league hadn't really seen, that player essentially disappeared before fans got to see what a full, healthy season looked like. This game is a preview of what that season starts to look like. The Indiana Fever's Instagram account was celebrating the double-double in real time during the game, which tells you something about how the organization is reading her performance and what they want their fan base to associate with her return. Lawson has already publicly signaled the direction the lineup is heading. The record-setting facilitation in 19 minutes off the bench, the 0 turnovers against a press defense, the way the offense completely changed character when she was on the floor. All of it points toward one conclusion about what Clark running a system for 30-plus minutes looks like when she's healthy and engaged and operating with real competitive rhythm. The ceiling of that 2026 Fever team is genuinely different from what most WNBA projections are currently accounting for. Not because of individual talent in isolation, but because of what this qualifying game demonstrated about the system-level production Clark generates when she's operating without constraints. The pace, the reads, the way teammates are suddenly getting clean looks in rhythm rather than contested shots at the end of the shot clock. That's not a single-game anomaly. That's a repeatable process, and 239 days away from competition didn't change it.
Here's where everything lands. 239 days off the floor. 5 FIBA world records broken in 19 minutes off the bench. A head coach who just confirmed publicly at the post-game podium that the starting lineup isn't settled. A 64-point blowout built largely on a decision-making engine that turned a full-court press designed for turnovers into a fast-break generating system. And a group of 6 debut players who, instead of looking like 6 separate adjustment curves, looked like a coordinated high-tempo unit with a real offensive identity. Clark didn't just return from injury and look good. She returned and immediately produced the most historically significant facilitate performance in FIBA qualifying tournament history as a reserve player, without turning the ball over, against a defense whose entire identity was built around forcing exactly the mistakes she refused to make. The records aren't the story by themselves. The records are just the numerical confirmation of what everyone watching could already see. That her processing speed, her vision, her ability to read a defense and make the right decision before the window closes is operating at a level that international basketball has genuinely never produced in a debut performance. The next qualifying game is the one that starts answering the question Lawson left deliberately open at that podium. Does Clark start? Does the second quarter unit that she identified as the group that elevated the game become the starting unit? Does Chelsea Gray's championship pedigree outweigh what 35 seconds and 19 minutes of live basketball just demonstrated on the floor? Those questions don't have answers yet, but the direction they're pointing has been clear since the moment Clark checked in and handed out 3 assists on 3 touches, while the defense that had just dismantled the starting lineup suddenly had no answers at all. 239 days, 5 records, 1 direction. The 2026 season can't get here fast enough.